SoulStream is a community.
A dispersed community.
A contemplative community.
Well, because we had been facilitating as a team, as a community, and community, we realized that it wasn't so much about the course as it was about the community. Mm-hmm. And we offer community when we teach the course in order to create community in the course. Mm-hmm. And then that became the way of us saying that really, fundamentally, SoulStream is a community, a dispersed contemplative community. Remember our mission statement? Mm-hmm. To nurture contemplative experience with Christ, leading to inner freedom and loving service.
SoulStream fosters a hope and an experience of gathering together with others and creating a sense of belonging where we can be supported in our lives of contemplation. Because, often in other parts of our lives, that is not understood, not supported, And so we create these times of just being together in community, and we know we're out there.
Yeah. SoulStream offers a supportive community for people who are trying to live a contemplative life in a world that makes it pretty hard to live contemplatively.
One of the expressions of SoulStream was around the spiritual direction training course.
That's how it started.
Mm-hmm. That's how it started, yeah. Mm-hmm. And over a period of time, people who were finishing the art of spiritual direction were saying, "You're going to leave us now?" Mm-hmm. after we finish this course and there's nothing else? And I still remember that moment when we were driving.
Me too. I can almost identify the fence post. This idea suddenly was articulated.
Yeah, that it's not about the course.
Yeah.
No.
That it's something bigger than that.
Yeah.
And we were sitting there and we were thinking about the contemplative life and thinking about the fact that people were asking to be brought into this kind of life together. And so we decided, okay, when we come back from our vacation, we'll call the 5 pastors who had approached me about this and said, "Can you teach us what you're doing?" And so we called them and said, "You guys want to meet?" And they said, "Sure, we'd be glad to." So those 5 plus 5 others, 5 men and 5 women, met here in our home. And we met consistently for about 3 months on Wednesday mornings and just began to learn what the contemplative life was. And it was really a journey for me because I had never taught even a Sunday school class.
Thank God.
That's right. And so then to be brought to teach these pastors, the night before we started, I'd had no sleep at all. I just couldn't sleep. I thought, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. But we just began to share together of what was happening. And it grew out of that.
But Steve, I'd like you to go back a little further. Your own movement toward contemplative experience and some of the struggle and some of the gifts meeting with the spiritual director was for you.
Well, I was certainly anything but contemplative. I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, so I'm a party person. And that's the most important thing for me, is to have fun. And so I was meeting with my spiritual director in Vancouver. She was a Catholic Senecal sister nun. And she began to journey with me about who I was and helping me find Christ in the everyday of my life. And then she said to me, after a couple of years of spiritual direction, she said, "You need to teach this." And I said, "Me teach this?" She said, "Yeah, you really do. It would be really important for you to do that. Because it needs to be brought into the community, the Protestant community, because there was nobody bringing it into at that time. This was 30 years ago, probably. And so I went to meet her. We moved to Edmonton at this time, and Jeff and I would go to Edmonton and spend time with her a week at a time, and she would give us a morning every day to teach us it was important for us to learn. It was a powerful journey for me to learn to live with a different purpose and with a different focus in my life instead of having fun.
One of the characteristics of SoulStream is to experience God's love in the midst of our frailty and our brokenness and our vulnerability. And you modeled that so profoundly from day one. And that's probably partly why the pastors wanted to meet with you, because they not only did they receive spiritual direction, but they knew you as a person. They knew that you didn't have it all together.
Yeah.
And that God was still at work in your life, and you could respond to love and offer love.
And I think that's why it was such a battle for me to even begin this, is because I realized, Steve, you're such a broken person. How in the world is God ever going to use you? And what would ever make him want to use you? But I just realized as I was doing this, okay, I'll just have to be honest and real with these people, and no matter what. And because that's the only way I can be. I have to be who I am, and God will deal with whatever he wants to out of that. And when Jeff and Joy came out here, Jean and I had another name. It was Interior Journeys, because it was about our own interior journey and helping people live. And Jeff said, that's not a very good name. We need to think of another name. And so we were fine with that. Let's think of another name.
Sounded too much like a laxative to me. Smooth.
I wasn't, smooth, that's right. You wanted a smoother move.
So anyway, finish the story, I interrupted.
And so the Interior Journeys, Jeff said, that sounds too interior. We need something else. So we were talking about it and brainstorming about it, and our grandson came up with the name SoulStream.
Yeah.
He just said, I think SoulStream is what you should use.
You mentioned that we've shown each other a lot of grace. Well, a huge, unforgettable moment of grace in my life, let alone my life in SoulStream, was I went through kind of a dark period where I became more and more unable to, as I experienced it, fulfill my duties. Like that includes like getting ready for teaching. We would each have some piece that we were responsible for, to prepare it ahead of time, to check it, and to offer it to the students. That would be some actual teaching, some exercises for the students to be able to grapple with the material, small groups, and so on. So arranging all of that. And then responding to students' work, what used to be called in the university that I was in marking. Well, we don't call it marking students' papers, but you need to respond, and you need to respond in a timely way. I was becoming really, really unable to do that. And I was falling farther and farther behind and becoming more and more afraid and more depressed. And it felt like moving into a tomb and there was stone being rolled across the door. So I was working with my own spiritual director through these many months and feeling very, very badly for my friends who were having to pick up the slack a lot. And so there were times, for one intensive I remember particularly, where I showed up and just felt like a lump in the chair as the students are gathering and we're getting ready to teach, and I'm thinking, I don't know if I'm hardly even here. That's the best I could do, is just to actually be sitting here in this chair this morning. And along comes Karen as the students are gathering, around the room, and she's got a check for me to pay me for my work. I'm assuming you had checks for other people as well. But you stood in front of me and you were handing me the envelope, and I realized what it was, and I said, I can't take that, Karen. I can't, I haven't done anything. And you kept on sort of insisting, sort of pushing it towards me, and I kept on backing up. And I said, just my experience, Karen, is that I'm just kind of dead. And you kind of bent down and you looked me straight in the eye and you said, well, consider this a check for, as we're paying you to be dead. I think it was pretty close to that. Well, think of it this way, we're paying you to be dead. To me, this is actually in some ways that's a quintessential story of the heart of SoulStream, that you can be dead. That is the sense of the wheels coming off your life, all the things you used to be able to do that I got my identity from. I'm a university teacher, was a university teacher. So study, really good design for curriculum, really good presence, facilitating other people's learning, giving positive, encouraging feedback. Couldn't do it any of it anymore. And I was being paid and encouraged. So Karen would say that not because she's clever or because anything, that's where she's at in her life with God. That's a manifestation of God's life in her, which can continue to evolve, because that was quite a few years ago.
That's quite a few years ago.
That was in Sue, that was in your house when we were teaching Saturdays.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Don't you feel that's part of the whole thing about being vulnerable to what's real in your life and what's broken in your life? But that's how you come to terms with being contemplative, because contemplative is a big word. In some ways it's a useless word.
Yeah.
But we get rid of, we finally bump up against all the ways in which we can't cope very well, and in which we're trying to cope to be somebody, and we start opening those up to Jesus' love for us. And that takes us deeper and to the very core of our beings, right? Past all the mirages and so then that's what that's what touches me, to keep me from just being inundated by culture and the drive to succeed and the contemplative life. Facing into my own stuff keeps me from, that's what directs me away from just being focused on doing and being, having.
I remember when we used to meet and plan curriculum, our group, and it would be a whole day affair. And I remember as it was going on and it was happening and it was beautiful and a lot of work. But I remember one conversation we had, and we said, how are we going to pass this leadership on? And we started to pay attention to that. I think it's a really an example of noticing, paying attention. And so when the courses were happening, you began to see people who have this beautiful potential, and we became intentional about noticing who might give leadership and so on, and it began to happen. I think for a while everybody wanted to have Steve and Jeff. They were kind of Steve Jeff groupies, and because they began this and so on, and there was a little bit of anxiety around, oh well, what if Steve and Jeff step down? And you know what? Beautiful leaderships come up. And so that gives me really great hope that this will continue to unfold.
That's the advantage of starting something when you're almost 65 to begin with. So, but it pushes you towards succession. And in part of spiritual direction, we're into our third succession there too.
Yeah.
So I find that incredibly encouraging, that continues the community spirit, because it's not just the guy that begins it, pushes it until he drops dead or something. Then it falls apart.
We call people who have made a commitment to SoulStream partners.
Yes.
And in a sense, what we're wanting to do is to partner together to hold this and to live this the SoulStream together and all that is involved.
It's such a natural thing, especially when people are stressed and busy, to want SoulStream to be something that is for them rather than them. It is them, and that's I think an ongoing challenge.
Well, we say that when people are being sponsored to partnership.
Yeah.
We ask, what are you hoping to receive from SoulStream, and what are you hoping to give to SoulStream? Then we also say, what's it going to be hard for the SoulStream partners to live with you? What are the reasons why it's going to be hard for you to be in? So for people to pay attention.
Because when we started it, I had no idea it was even going to become an organization. You know, I just thought it would be a few people that get together and help each other out a bit and, you know, encourage each other. So to see that happen and to see it begin to even go further, I have no idea what it's going to become, but I'm thrilled at what is happening.
And I think it started really when we decided we have to make a decision here. Are we going to go full-time into spiritual direction work, or is Steve going to continue with his dental sales? So my girlfriends from high school, we rented a place on Oregon coast, and as 3 couples, we met down there. We told them we had a big decision to make that weekend too, so we needed a couple hours. And of course, the Oregon coast is one of the most beautiful places to try to sit and meditate and make decisions. So we did. And, well, Steve said, no, we have to really be serious about this and, you know, be thinking this.
Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm looking out at the waves, and they're big on the Oregon coast. And I thought, God, there's no way I can walk on water. You're asking us to do this. We're going to walk right out of a really good job that Steve has and have to go do what? We had no assurance of any support that way. So I started to laugh. And Steve whirls around, and we've been sitting in these big Adirondack trees. He says, what's so funny?
So this isn't a funny decision we're making. And so she told me about seeing the waves coming in. I can't handle these waves. I can't do it. And I said, isn't that interesting? Because in the quietness of my time of just meditating, all I could see was a huge door, and it was closed. And I thought, I can't get through this door. There's no way I can get through here. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I knew that it meant the door to the dental sales career had closed, and I had to find a different way.
But we both heard the same words, like Jesus was just standing there. Trust me, just like he said to Peter, you know, as he was sinking in the waves. And I'm thinking, okay. And Steve heard the same thing too.
Yeah, I just heard, can you trust me? And I, of course, was saying, no, I can't. But we'll see where this goes anyway, because you never really let me down. So, and I couldn't help but think, as we were at that place, I couldn't help but think of a brother and a sister and their spouses who had been missionaries, and they'd given up everything and went over to Thailand. And I thought, if they can live that way, if they can go that way, maybe God will supply something for us, because we had no idea. No income, no promised anything.
Well, at the time, he'd been giving spiritual direction. I mean, but no idea of classes or anything like that. That hadn't even formed. But that's what was so beautiful. Yeah. Those classes started.
Well, right after we got home. This was in September, and in October, 3 pastors that I was giving spiritual direction came to me separately. And they said, can you teach us what you're doing? As pastors, this is what we should be doing. And I said, well, let me think about it, knowing that I hadn't taught anybody anything. And so I said, give me a month. So after a month, I called them. I said, I'll meet with you, and we can talk about this. So they met with me with 5 other people. Altogether, there were 10. And
At the end. Yeah.
At the end, there were 10. And I said, well, I'll be glad to teach you what I know. I don't know how to teach. We can share stuff together, and we'll learn together. So that's how the journey began there.
My story with SoulStream actually began with me looking for a spiritual director. We were living in Kelowna at the time, and I had noticed quite a longing in myself to meet with somebody that was really just focused for me in my spiritual walk. I was doing I was up to my eyeballs in church work, and I was meeting with a lot of people. People were seeking me out to meet with them, but there was nobody to meet with me. So I was out for a walk with a friend one day, and I just said, I'd love to have a spiritual director, but there was nobody in Kelowna. And she said, well, I happen to know a spiritual director, but he lives down at the coast. Turns out it was Steve. And so I got in contact with Steve, and I asked if he'd come to Kelowna, to our church, to do a prayer retreat. And it was unlike any sort of prayer retreat I'd ever been to before. And there was a possibility in our lives that I was going to be at the coast in Vancouver a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a month for the next year. So I asked him if he would take me on as a directee, not really knowing what I was asking. And so he said yes. And the first time I met with him, I felt like I was fully engaged in what we were doing, but I also felt like I was a fly on the wall, watching. And I thought, this is how I want to be with other people. So, I mean, the process of being in spiritual direction was just so enormously helpful for me. But I also realized that this was more of the posture that I wanted to have with others. And so there was a bit of a story then around how I came into spiritual direction training, but it was through that I became connected with SoulStream.
I think it actually pulled us together. We knew we were in this together, and I knew that Jean we were really together in life. And I knew that this wouldn't pull us apart. She would stick with me, and we would find a way through it. And that's what happened.
Yeah, it was actually kind of exciting in a way. It was as scary as it was too, like big waves can be. And just when I think about that comparison, but there was something almost exhilarating, like what's going to happen? How is this going to work out? And when we realized there was, besides spiritual direction one-on-one, the classes, I thought, wow, that's beautiful. And in the meantime, I had been doing some graphic design work, so I could do some for advertising, or not advertising, but just sort of setting up brochures and that to help the classes along, and it was fun.
Well, my journey with SoulStream began when I couldn't pray anymore. I was a pastor of a church, and I went to the Catholic convent to have spiritual direction, finally, out of desperation. And that transformed my life. The movement toward prayer and open-heartedness to God. I used to think Catholics were works-oriented and evangelicals were faith-oriented, and I found out that she knew much more about grace than I ever knew as a Protestant, and it was wonderful for me. So then I got Steve going in the same direction, and he started doing that out here. And then in a long journey, my wife passed away, and Joy and I met in 2000. Was it 2000? Yeah.
Yep.
And so we were living in Calgary at the time. I ended up not being in the church anymore. I had finished my term there. And Joy and I were looking at where to go, and we thought about coming to the Lower Mainland because that's where Joy had lived a little bit, and she loved it, and Steve and Jean were here, and Steve had started this program, so we wanted to help out with it. And Joy was enjoying herself.
Yes, I was.
Jeff and I get along very well. We have since we were little kids, but working together has actually helped us bond even in a different way. We don't see each other a lot because he lives in White Rock and we live here. And so we don't socialize a lot together, but we just teach together. And we make decisions about SoulStream together.
They make a good balance, I think, because Steve's kind of more personable type, and Jeff is more he's a brainy type, and they admire each other. And that's beautiful, because when you can admire what the other can give, and it's been a good balance for SoulStream too.
Mm-hmm.
My beginning with SoulStream started actually in Ontario, and knew Tony was retiring, and I knew we were moving to Abbotsford. And I was part of a spiritual direction community there, the contemplative community, and I had a really not such a great attitude because I thought, oh boy, we're moving to Abbotsford. Is there anything like this that could be happening in Abbotsford? And at the same time, a brochure came in from the Henry Nouwen Society that they were beginning in Canada. And so I thought, oh, wow, maybe we can host a book club at our home when we're in Abbotsford around Henry Nouwen. And I looked in the brochure, and here in the back, I was looking at the directors, and there was a Steve Imbach from Abbotsford. And I thought, wow, someone knows about Henry Nouwen, who lives in Abbotsford. And so I went right to the phone, and I'm an introvert, so this was not me, really. I wouldn't do this, but I picked it up, I called information, I found out Steve and Jean's telephone number, and I called, and Jeannie answered the phone. And I said, you don't know me, but I just read that Steve's on the Henry Nouwen board. And she says, yeah, he is. And I explained myself, and she says, I'm sorry, he'd love to talk to you, but he's teaching spiritual direction at Regent. And I didn't even know Steve was a spiritual director then. And Jeannie says, well, when you're in Abbotsford, come to our church. We want to meet you. So we did. And we met them. And Steve was just and Jeannie were just so welcoming and so open-hearted to us. And that's how the journey began with SoulStream.
My personality is such that I kind of expect the hard, and it's been a growth process for me for a long time to not go there and to trust that Jesus has something positive in mind for me. I've gone through some long processes of letting go of my mistakes in the past, of not taking initiative when I could have, and my fear of actually doing things, getting a PhD, for example, or something like that. But this has just been a joy to let it unfold. Like it hasn't been a struggle so much as it has been an incredible gift to see other people participating and enjoying it and gathering together and it being open-hearted, and I'm not trying to pull teeth, and it's been good.
As we got together with all of the founders every month, and we'd have an afternoon of working and talking through stuff, and then dinner together and sharing what's happening in our lives at that time. That was all really new for me, and that was really a wonderful sense of trust and community. People caring about you, people caring about each other. It was, I think that was the best part for me, was that not involved in the other part.
I am in awe that none of us have the vision, the capacity to have the vision of what it has become and will become. But we are, I guess, together humble enough to see where God is leading, and in any practical decision, should we do this, should we do that, should we wait, and to sort of just go forward as things unfold, and just try to listen for where the Spirit goes, and to see that the Spirit does lead, and that we have been led. We think that we're making decisions, but we do listen to what we sense that God is, inviting us to. So it's the awe that God really does do this, if you shut up and listen. And secondly, I would say gratitude for what God has done through very ordinary people who hardly know what they're doing and are stumbling through life just like everybody else.
It really was a matter of, okay, are we going to trust what has already come to be to carry us forward as far as organic grace, God unfolding something here. And I think we all had that sense. There is just an unfolding here. And there wasn't really a lot of, moving to figuring it out and strategy and so on. I mean, we certainly had ideas of things, but we really knew what was important, and that it not become an institution and that
church.
type of thing. Yeah, well, yeah. That it maintained that beauty of organic unfolding.
When we started it, I had no idea it was even going to become an organization. You know, I just thought it would be a few people that get together and help each other out a bit and, you know, encourage each other. But so to see that happen and to see it begin to even go further, I have no idea what it's going to become, but I'm thrilled at what is happening.
It's really quite a remarkable what's happened here. I think it's and the word grace is really about all you can use.
To live a life of prayer, I knew I needed a community, and I needed a particular kind of community. And it was very clear to me that the little group of people that included, you know, Steve and Jeff and Joy and Jean and Sue and Tony and Karen and Doug, this was a community that was like that. That's just who they are. And so that's why it's what you know when you join a group of people and they ask you about yourself and they listen. You know, there's all kinds of tiny signs that I think I now take for granted because I'm surrounded by people like that in my life. But to me, at that time, it was an enormous relief. And it felt like coming home, which is a phrase we hear from participants in our programs all the time. This feels like home. I feel like I've come home. So I think there's multi-layers to what that means to people, but to me it meant things like welcome, being accepted as you are, and these people know your faults. And there's laughter, and there's, you know, sharing of meals and a glass of wine, and there's some kind of work to do together.
Yeah, but I think one of the great gifts you've always given to SoulStream, Steve, is that one of the characteristics of SoulStream is to experience God's love in the midst of our frailty and our brokenness and our vulnerability. And you modeled that so profoundly from day one. And that's probably partly why the pastors wanted to meet with you, because they not only did they receive spiritual direction, but they knew you as a person. They knew that you didn't have it all together.
Yeah.
And that God was still at work in your life, and you could respond to love and offer love.
And I think that's why it was such a battle for me to even begin this, is because I realized, Steve, you're such a broken person. How in the world is God ever going to use you? And what would ever make him want to use you? But I just realized as I was doing this, okay, I'll just have to be honest and real with these people, and no matter what. And because that's the only way I can be. I have to be who I am, and God will deal with whatever he wants to out of that, even if it's a mess.
Yeah, that wisdom is so echoed. When I think back over all these years of teaching, then every cohort has said, you know, individuals in each group of students has said, what really attracts me to SoulStream is the facilitators' love and care for each other.
Personality-wise, God has been merciful to us in terms of getting along with each other.
It's been amazing. Because there's been
Karen looks at me.
There's been much grace shown me.
or me.
All of
That's
us.
one of the things that's been beautiful for me, is to realize that we haven't had personality conflicts, and there's nobody who's trying to be the big leader.
Yeah,
So nobody's pushing for the top.
yeah,
We all just want to be together.
yeah.
And that's huge for me.
Wow. SoulStream is I guess it's a opportunity to explore the contemplative life. It's an opportunity to learn about heart faith rather than head faith. All the things that have benefited the people that have gone through the courses are there for everybody, and it can change people's lives in real ways.
There was something almost exhilarating, like what's going to happen? How is this going to work out? And when we realized there was, besides spiritual direction one-on-one, the classes, we thought, wow, that's beautiful.
Well, it feels like it's opening up, spreading out, and everybody seems to be doing their part. And it's just lovely to see a dispersed community that's connected together. Yeah.
That's a really hard thing, a dispersed community. Well, if you live it in a house, then you're engaged all the time, and you can have struggles, but at least you're engaged directly with each other. But when you're dispersed, so one person lives in Prince George pretty much by himself, like, how does he belong to this community? So it takes work to actually continue to deepen the connectedness.
I think something that was that sort of caught me off guard, but really was what I was hoping for, was that there would be a place where I could be completely honest, where I didn't have to put on a face that I had it all together, that there would be room for questions, that there would be room for tears, without someone trying to fix me.
I don't trust God easily. I find it difficult because I like to control things and manage things myself and make sure that everything's happening the way I want it to happen. And trusting God to work this thing out has just been a real challenge for me.
My hope for SoulStream would be that it would remain organic, that it wouldn't become institutional, but that it would hold a framework through which people can still discover and encounter Jesus deeply, through which to live life deeply and honestly and vulnerably. Sort of just more of where we've been. It's so hard to know, we don't have this 5 or 10 year business plan. We're not striving to reach something, but we deeply want others to encounter God.
God is alive and working in love in your life. Never failing. And all we need to do together is to support each other in listening, because God wants to be known as loving and leading towards wholeness in the direction of love and reconciliation. That's what I would like people to know about God, and that SoulStream is only wanting to make the space and support each other in watching for that God of loving action.
Often the contemplative journey, especially when you're still part of a different faith community, another faith community, a lot of people don't understand this. And so it is a way of just continuing to be nurtured in what's growing in them, the freedom that is growing in them, that God is growing in them. It's a place where they can be supported. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah.